We didn't really know how to run our own business. We didn't know anything about the textile trade. It was really in at the deep end, but we sort of thought, well, if you don't try, you'll never know. We spent the next 12 months slowly developing the product to where we thought it was going to be, you know, a good, reliable product for somebody, for a customer to use. Because it's all right using something yourself that isn't quite perfect, but when you're selling them, they've got to be right, you know. The trouble with not knowing the textile trade at all, we didn't know how to test fabric, for instance, of how waterproof it was, or it was literally a matter of make it and go and use it. So I'd literally be out in every storm that we could possibly go in. The worst conditions, I'm literally there on my own. Everybody else has stayed at home and I'm there on my own. And it, to the point of you couldn't really fish. The winds were that strong that you couldn't keep your rods on the rest, never mind cast out or anything. But it was very much about trying and testing the product to get it to a point where it could stand up to the worst of the weather. I mean, I remember saying to my wife Dawn, what I really need is a wind speed indicator, because I don't know how strong these winds are. They're forecasting 60-mile-an-hour winds, but I don't know whether I'm experiencing 60-mile-an-hour winds. I mean, you can hardly stand up in it, but I need a figure, and if I'm going to sell them, I need to be able to say it can do this. The trouble was, we were literally running on a shoestring. I mean, I hadn't got a big pot of money that I was developing these things with. It was literally earn a bit and spend a bit and earn a bit and spend a bit as you went along. And to buy something like a wind speed indicator back then, you know, was going to cost hundreds of pounds. So I'd got this bit of a daft idea that I could perhaps make one. So I got an old Smith's clock off my old time of Bonneville. I thought if I attach a pole to it, I could stick that in the ground. I could have a propeller feeding into the input shaft where normally your speedo cable would come in, and that would turn the clock, and therefore I could see what speed the winds were doing. But the trouble is I need to calibrate it. So I've got this bright idea of if we were to drive along in the car and Dawn could hold it out the window and I could drive along at 6, because my first target was 60 mile an hour. I'd got to build a bivvy that could stand 60. So we drive along at 60 mile an hour and see what the clock was reading, and even if it was reading 40, I knew 40 would then be 60. So we could then calibrate it at different speeds, and I could sort of put some stickers on it even, so I knew what it was doing. So anyway, we get going down the dual carriageway, and Dawn's got it out the window, and this thing's humming. I mean, it's really buzzing away. And she's like cringing in the seat like this, holding this pole out the window, and I'm getting up to like 45, and what's it doing now? It's reading 30 like this. You go along. We get up to 60 mile an hour. Just as we get to 60, boom, the whole thing exploded. There's like shrapnel bouncing around inside the car. How anybody never got hurt, I had no idea. She just dropped it, you know, literally the clock's bouncing down the road behind us because it literally exploded. So that was a disaster. Luckily nobody got hurt, but you know, it seemed like a plan, and it would have been all right. It would have been all right at 50 mile an hour. So never quite got that one off the ground. Then in my motorbike years, I remembered one of the lads, I used to be in a motorbike club, and one of the lads, he was into flying small aircraft, and he'd actually done his license so he could be a tutor, yeah, so he could teach other people how to fly. So he got his own little flying school going. So I hadn't seen him for a year or two, and phoned him up and spoke to him about it, and he says, yeah, so came over, seen him, actually had a go in this little plane. It's a small plane, not a microlight, you know, sort of fixed wing, but small. And so I run the idea past him that what if we could strap his plane down to a tree, and then it could create as much wind as we wanted. We could put the bivvy up behind the plane, and we could keep revving it up and revving it up and revving it up until eventually it failed. I wanted to know what was the weakest point. By this time, we'd set our sights on 70 mile an hour, so we'd got to withstand 70. So we still not got a wind speed indicator, but on the plane there is basically a tube that sticks out the front of the plane, and it senses the air pressure, and the more pressure there is, the faster it's going. Yeah? So it's a calibrated method. So we thought if we get a long pipe and put it onto that, like a long hose pipe, run it round to the back of the bivvy, and then have it facing forward again, it's going to be sensing the same pressure that it would be if it was flying along. So that would then give us the speed of the wind that was travelling past the bivvy. You with me? So he's like, yeah, okay, that sounds doable. So after a couple of weeks went by, we arranged it, went over, and we strapped the plane down to a tree. Actually 2 trees with 2 big ratchet straps, and it got to be really secure, and he was quite worried at the time, because if these things let go and this plane's revving up, it's just going to go careering across the field. So we've got it well strapped down. I've got the bivvy up round behind, and of course any bivvy is only as good as its weakest point. And if your pegs are going into loose ground, or you've got really small pegs, we weren't testing the pegs. So we used quite big pegs. We're testing the bivvy as its weakest point. What was going to fail first, and what would be the eventual wind speed that we could get to. So the plane's capable of doing 120 mile an hour. So I'm thinking we're just going to keep going here until it trashes the thing, you know. So anyway, we picked the revs up and picked the revs up and picked the revs up. Kept going around checking the speed and everything. And it's like, okay, we're up to 50. We got to 68 mile an hour. And it wouldn't do it anymore. It was absolutely flat out, the plane was. It was singing away. And it wasn't until we sort of thought about afterwards why that was. And it's because the plane's capable of doing 120 mile an hour, but the propeller doesn't become efficient until it's moving through the air. It's trying to move stationary air almost. So it maxed out at basically 68. So we never actually quite got that 70 mile an hour, but we could go around to the bivvy and apply extra pressure to it. And, you know, we were confident it was easily going to withstand 70, because we could lean on it as much as we wanted almost, and nothing was giving. So, yeah, that was quite an amusing time.